And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Today's sea ice analysis still showing diminishing ice here across the southern portion of the ice edge. Still a lot of shore-fast ice, especially up here southern Norton Sound, around portions of the Yukon Delta, and then on down here in toward Kuskokwim Bay on the northern side there of that area. And not much change expected over the next couple of days, except continued slow melting here in the southern areas. And for tonight's weather, band of snow here from the eastern Bering Sea and Nunivak Island extends all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast there. Drier conditions, central interior. Periods of light rain from Bristol Bay along a weak front that stretched out across southern Alaska. That'll finally push some light rain in over most areas of the southeast coast. And rain or showers will continue with a little bit cooler temperatures down over the Panhandle tomorrow. Periods of rain here, Copper River Basin shifting northward there into the upper Tanana Valley and 40 Mile Country, back into south central Alaska. Some areas of snow continuing with gusty northeast winds through the passes of Brooks Range there, and then more showery conditions here over the eastern Bering Sea, really becoming widely scattered actually for the eastern Aleutians. Alaska Peninsula, a break over Adak and Atka, and a weak system farther out to the west. Just kind of slides southeastward for Monday there. Doesn't really amount to too much. Scattered showers of rain or snow, mostly snow from the Pribilofs northward to the Bering Strait. Improving conditions here over the northern part of the state there, but still some light snow for the eastern Arctic coast. Cloudy and occasionally damp across southern Alaska into the southeast coast, with areas of rain here for the Copper River Basin, possibly up into the areas north of the eastern Alaska Range. Coastal water forecast, south coast here. South winds 20 knots for Sunday. North coast, east-southeast at 20 knots, seas 6 to 7 feet. Lynn Canal, light south wind at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. Stevens Passage, southeasterlies at 15. And for Clarence Strait, southeast winds 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Outlook for Monday, Clarence Strait, southerlies at 15 knots, southeast at 10 for Stevens Passage, south at 10 for Lynn Canal. And for the south coast, not too bad. South to southeast winds 10 to 15 knots. Central coast, south to southeast winds 15 knots. And the north coast, winds east at 15 knots. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, winds east at 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Variable winds at 10 knots for the North Gulf Coast, with seas running about 5 to 6 feet. Northwest 15 for the Barren Islands. Light variable winds here for Kamishak Bay for a change at 10 knots. And Cook Inlet, north winds 10 to 15 knots with 2 to 3 foot seas. And for Monday, winds swing around to the south and southwest for Cook Inlet at about 15 knots. And light variable winds here for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, as well as the North Gulf Coast. Southeast at 10 for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. Bristol Bay, small craft advisories, west winds at 25 knots. For the Alaska Peninsula, about the same. West winds, west to northwest winds 25 to as high as 30 knots, so seas anywhere from 4 to 10 feet. And then for Monday, here for the peninsula, northwest winds or west northwesterlies at 15 to 20 knots. Bristol Bay, west at 20 knots. And that west wind blows right across Kodiak Island. And for the eastern Aleutians, small craft advisories tomorrow. West northwest winds 25 to 30 knots, strongest there for Unalaska Island. Adak and Atka, westerlies at about 20 knots. And Amchitka Island, west northwest at 15 knots. Kiska to Shimia, southeast winds at 20. Then for Monday, light variable winds here for Amchitka Island, eastern Aleutian or western Aleutians, east winds 15 to 20 knots. Adak and Atka still looking at fairly light winds out of the northwest at 15 knots. Eastern Aleutians, same forecast, northwest winds 15 knots. And for Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, Yukon Delta Coast, and St. Matthew Island, north winds 25 knots for the day Sunday, seas 4 to 6 feet, and northwest 25 for the Pribilofs with seas up to 8 feet. Kuskokwim Delta Coast, northwest winds at 20 knots. And then the outlook for Monday, Norton Sound winds down to west at 10 knots, west 15 for St. Lawrence Island, Southwest coast here, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. Pribilof's northwest at 15. And for St. Matthew Island, north winds at 20 knots. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, brisk wind advisories for northeast winds at 25 knots, down to about 20 knots though for the central coast. Western Arctic coast, northeast 25, and gale warnings continue here for the Chukchi Sea for north to northeast winds at 35 knots. Outlook for Monday, Chukchi Sea, brisk wind advisories here, northeast winds at 25 to 30 knots, northeast 30 knots for the western Arctic coast, central coast, northeast at 20, and the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, north to northeast winds 20 to 25 knots.